This is Carolyn Wheeler with the Kentucky Support Employment Training Project with the Human Development Institute, and I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Katie Wolf-Smith. Katie, if you'd like to say hello.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing this afternoon meeting the challenges to successful transition. And I've made a subtitle of Creating, Supporting, and Defending Adult Roles Regardless of the Impact of Disability, because it's at least my thesis that if we do that, we will have the requisite motivation to figure out the things that need to be figured out to create successful transitions. And so I'd like to first acknowledge the contributions of three groups of people. The first is Hope Dittmeyer, who is also a friend and colleague, and I've utilized some of Hope's material in this presentation regarding social roles and social role valorization, and also just Hope's incredible brilliance and creativity in designing personalized supports for people regardless of the impact of disability. Secondly, would like to acknowledge Bruce Anderson with Community Activators. I'm going to be talking briefly about some of his work and the 3 gift buckets, which is a helpful tool in thinking about folks' contributions. And then last but not least, really too numerous to list. In fact, I think some of you are even on the webinar this afternoon, but parents and students with disabilities with whom I have personally had the privilege to meet and work with to create a good life after high school, and from whom I've learned a great deal. So I'd like you just briefly to think back about when you were 18 years of age, and I'm going to assume that everybody on this webinar has passed that milestone in their lives. And so think about when you were a teenager. What were you hoping to accomplish? Did you have direction, or were you still searching? Did you make any big mistakes along the way, especially between the ages of 18 and 22? What did you do right? And then what do you wish you had done differently? And then just to think now as an adult, have your goals and aspirations changed since you were that age? Are you on the same path as when you graduated from high school? What have you learned from your successes? And what have you also learned from your failures? Because I'd like us to put this transition planning into context. But I think all too often we have some unreasonable expectation that young adults with disabilities at the age of 18 know everything they want to do with the rest of their lives. And so to keep some perspective about this is really, we're helping to help people set on a positive path, but that it's a process and not an event, and that hopefully there will be many changes that will continue them to help them to seek their dreams and possibilities as they move on through their adult life. And so meeting the challenges of successful transition, I would like to suggest to you what I think is perhaps a fairly radical thought. Because all too often it seems to me that people think about successful transition having something to do with making sure we have all the service providers in place. And while I won't deny that that's a critical piece of it, my perspective, and now having been involved in some way in this arena since about 1990, is that there has to be a vision of the student as a young adult with an identity separate from his or her family in order to have a successful transition. This is a picture of Danny Lederer, and Leslie actually was involved in transition planning meetings for Danny when he was a student in Jefferson County Public Schools many, many years ago. This is a picture of Danny with his brother-in-law at the wedding of his sister, and I can say without doubt that it was in fact having this vision of Danny as a young adult that motivated his parents to figure a number of things out and continue to create a very positive and good life for Danny throughout his life, regardless of the significance of the impact of disability, which is quite substantial. And that figuring out and supporting valued social roles is the key to success. Because again, it creates the motivation, it creates the context for then organizing supports and services around someone, as well as thinking about those informal supports and the role of family and others to help people to have a good life. So just really a quick overview of social roles, again, drawn from the work of Wolf Wolfensberger and then adapted by Hope Dittmeyer. Social roles are something that we all operate in, and we just don't think about it because it's really the way we organize our lives, that they're really a predictable pattern of behavior, responsibilities, and I think that's really a key word that sometimes is not seemingly a part of the lives of many young adults with disabilities, expectations and privileges. And that roles have a major impact, how we are perceived by others, our own self-image and sense of worth, our experience of acceptance and belonging, and the degree of autonomy and freedom that we are afforded. Roles have a major impact in terms of the opportunity to make a meaningful contribution to others. It's in the context of having a valued role that we are then able to exercise our gifts and talents. It has an impact on the number and quality of our relationships. It has an impact on the chance for personal growth and development, and even the belongings that we possess. And so social roles, we can categorize them to some extent in these three categories. And I would like to think that successful transitions would involve helping people to continue to either be involved in these roles or to create and support them as they're moving through their adult lives. But family roles, adult roles, and then citizen roles. And all too often, the major role that young adults with disabilities seem to transition into is the role of client. And while that may have a positive impact in terms of helping to support people in some of these roles, I think for all of us, we would agree that we tend to think of ourselves as clients for short periods of time, and usually it's in the context of getting a particular service that helps us to be healthy or safe, but it's not our identity as an adult in this society. And so valued social roles, again, just include those that involve our being able to be participants and contributing members in our family, to have friends that are not paid to be in our lives, to be employed, and to be positive contributing members in our community, regardless, again, of the impact of disability. And so a really good example, and actually I've just got this today, is about Clayton Carroll. Well, there's an article that actually was published in the Williams Syndrome Association about Clayton. Clayton is a young man who lives in Dunville, Kentucky, and which is a fairly rural area of Kentucky. And he actually does have supports through the Michelle P. waiver. But the article really talks about all of the valued social roles that Clayton, as a 17-year-old with a pretty significant impact of disability, is participating in. Now at 17 years of age, he and a positive example both of high expectations and of the way in which his parents have really, his mom and his stepdad, have really organized the Michelle P. waiver, as well as created opportunities for Clayton within school to participate. I think it's in the band. And then he also now has a part-time job. He works 2 days a week at a local establishment there in Dunville. And so it's just, again, a really great example of how they really have a vision for Clayton as a young adult. The person that's recruited to actually work with Clayton through the Michelle P. waiver is an age-appropriate peer. It's a young man, probably in his mid to late 20s, who then is teaching Clayton things that he needs to know in order to be a successful adult. So we'll just move along. But I would really encourage you to check out the link. It looks like Patty has given that to you at some point, and to read it, because it's really encouraging, but also it's very positive around this whole issue of really creating those opportunities while people are still in high school. Because all too often transition planning looks like this, that we think that young adults are going to transition from school into some kind of a placement, and that we're looking for some kind of a program where people can spend maybe up to 40 hours a week. And so really wanting to move, especially now with the development of the Michelle P. waiver, that really people have available to them the opportunity to create a very significant, meaningful life for themselves, if they choose to do so. So one of the tools that I'd like to offer to you, that again, Activator's website, which would be a great tool to use around identifying a student's gifts, because I'd like to suggest that that can be a really great tool when you're planning around the future. So there are gifts of wisdom that each of us have, and students with disabilities have as well, that come from the wisdom and mentoring of others. Gifts of passage, all of us that have gifts because of things that we've gone through, things that we've overcome, and opportunities or strength that's developed within each of us that's created our character. And then last but not least are gifts of talent. And I think especially those of you who are involved in the support and employment arena through the discovery process, this is really what you're looking to identify. What are the gifts, the natural abilities that people are born with or may have acquired as a result of the opportunities that they've been presented with in their lives? And so Bruce Anderson has actually on this website a sheet where you can look at the talents and the gifts that people have in terms of the head, the hand, and the heart. So again, it may be somebody has tremendous ability to work with a computer, or the hand. It may be that somebody is really, really good at cooking. They can really utilize the instruments that are required in the kitchen. And the gifts of the heart often have much more to do with a person's personality, their attributes. It may be that those are gifts that it's people's presence. People enjoy having them around, and so they have the gift of welcoming. And so this is a tool that, again, can be part of the person-centered planning that you can access through that website. And so HOPE, I think, has a really helpful structure or conceptual framework for how we can integrate people's assets, interests, and then the conditions that can really help them to be successful in developing and learning about and exercising their gifts and talents, and then can hopefully go into the development of valued social roles. So this is also a framework from Hall Bates from Southern Illinois University. This is similar to the information that Lita Hall and Anita McNeil presented during the second webinar around person-centered planning. But I think all too often we tend to get I can point out, we tend to think that the triangular pieces, the service pieces, are really what create successful transition. And what I'd like to show you is that really they are the supporting pieces to successful transition. That it's really figuring out what John's desired lifestyle would look like in terms of, and again, these would be valued roles. Would he be a student at a community college? Would he have a job and he would be employed as an employee, as a library assistant? That he would be a member of a church, and that he would have opportunities there to contribute, whether he's an usher or maybe he helps in the nursery, or maybe he's involved with a youth group at this point in time, and then maybe we would hope that he might have an apartment with a friend, so he would be a roommate. And so the triangular pieces are then the supporting pieces. Those are the service pieces, as well as hopefully we would have unpaid support that would help to make that happen. And so I would suggest to you that in terms of successful strategy is really adopting what I think, again, is very similar to what Nita and Anita talked about, but perhaps a bit simplified, is that really utilizing a person-centered planning tool to create a collective vision, to create either the plan of care or to create the individual learning plan that can then lead to effective interagency collaboration, personalized supports around, again, these outcomes and valued roles will really is part of what will help people to overcome the challenges. All too often, though, we start, it seems to me, with this. We start with thinking we just need to get all of the agencies in the room. And my experience has been if the folks come from the various agencies but they don't know what the vision is, and they don't know what it is they're supposed to do, and they don't know what their role is, and they may or may not then really understand what it is that what their contribution would be to creating that desired lifestyle. So it really starts with the vision that needs to involve then, again, the identification of roles that we'd like people to be able to participate in. So this slide and the other one is actually from a book called Pathfinders. And actually, I'm going to show you a workbook that you could obtain that actually helps, again, in this thinking around how do we move away from a placement mentality toward how do we develop individualized lives for students. And so these were actually examples of, I guess there were 6 students involved in a particular project where, again, you can see that they're going to have jobs, they're going to have a social life, they may be involved in learning something new such as karate, but that then the personalized supports were what helped people to be able to participate in those opportunities. And so Beth Mount, who actually wrote the book Pathfinders, has a really awesome tool that could really help around that development of the vision. It's called Building New Worlds and the Imaginative Journey Workbook, and it's available through her website, which is Capacity Works 2. And so you can order both of those books, and they're actually right now on sale. So that the Building New Worlds is $10, and the Imaginative Journey Workbooks are $1 a piece. So for $20, you would actually have resources for 10 students that I've actually used with students, and I actually used it in groups where students come together with their parents and siblings, and often supports that they have either through their church or through their school to help, again, identify what could be a positive outcome for them as well as roles they could participate in. And so that's just another helpful resource around the whole area of person-centered planning that, again, has a focus on helping to think about what would be valued social roles. So the role that I'd like to spend some additional time on or focus on, and then Katie will also be talking about, is the role of employee. Now, I am assuming, although that the webinar that Dr. Kleinert and Dr. Hall or Mita Hall did around evidence-based practices talked about some of the experiences that if students have in high school, there's a higher likelihood they're going to have successful transitions, which includes involvement in extracurricular activities and also working. And so one of the barriers that often I have come across is that families or guardians or sometimes teachers may not understand what happens to young adults if they go to work and what happens to their benefits. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time on that. But just first to point out that work is vital for any teenager to transition into adulthood, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. It's a role that's expected of adults, and so having those opportunities while one is still in high school to work part-time, to work in the summer, is really part of what helps actually young adults to mature and to gain necessary discipline, and also often to understand money and and the role of saving and how we can use that to actually save for things that we might want to be able to buy, as well as contribute to the household expenses. So it's a way of helping people to transition into adulthood without sort of just assuming that at age 18 all of a sudden they're going to know what it means to make a living and to be able to manage their own resources. And so again, as I said earlier, it's one of the evidence-based practices regarding successful transition. And there is a huge incentive from Social Security for students on SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, to be employed. Now, there could be students on what's called Social Security Disability Insurance, but I'm going to speak this afternoon mainly just on SSI, because that would be, if there is a Social Security disability benefit involved in their lives, that most likely is the one for probably 99.9%. So there are some additional helpful resources on the Support Employment Training Project's website. So this would be a website I would highly recommend if you're a special education teacher, if you are a counselor with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, if you are a parent. Regardless of your role, there is a tremendous amount of helpful information on this website. And you can see here there's actually information for job seekers and families. It's a dedicated web page for job seekers and families around supported employment, what services are provided through supported employment, as well as a number of other resources that I'll come back to related to the impact of wages on benefits. I think we have time. So I'm going to go to the resources section. I'm going to click on employment resources. Then we're going to tab down to, you can see all kinds of wonderful things. The Office of Disability and Employment Policy, customized employment video links. And I'd like to show you one that gives a really good example of customized employment, which is really what we're teaching employment specialists to facilitate on behalf of people with disabilities.
Customized employment is a process. It's also an outcome. The very notion of customized is that it's about the person. So if work is to be about the person, then the next question is, well, who is the person?
For people with disabilities, entrepreneurship is a real good way to make a living. If you can create your own workplace environment, then you are going to be much better at creating one that you can live with and thrive in.
Pop and Joe's is a very popular addition to our market. When they're not here on Wednesdays, people ask for them.
Kettle corn's a very multi-step process. There's always something different to do, and he can always find something. When he gets bored with one task, there's always another task to do. There's popping, there's bagging, there's salting, there's all kinds of different things. And then, of course, delivering and interacting with the community.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
I did have a glimpse of his economic situation when we were building the business plan. First year of being in business, his net profits were averaged $900 a month versus he was working a whole month at this other traditional view of him for $20.
I love being Pop and Joe. I love being around people who know me and greet me.
All individuals have something to offer, and one of the ways that people with disabilities can be employed is to offer the best that they have, and to have the employment relationship be based on that.
Oh, it's squish it in there. We probably sell somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $6,000 per year of Joe's product. That's a lot of popcorn, a lot of happy customers.
Okay, let's do caramel corns.
1, 2, 3.
And I just love to see him counting and adding and handing you that invoice for the signature, and it gives me a great feeling. Thank you, Joe.
It is phenomenally different economically than it would be as a wage employee. It's not some trivial pursuit, it's ongoing, serious work he's doing every day, and he certainly enjoys it.
Customized employment offers opportunity where the unique needs of a workplace can be matched with the specific contributions of a job seeker. The outcome is a unique relationship with the employer. Discovery is the foundation of customized employment.
When you're doing discovery for the individual, you're going to their homes, you're going to their last places where they worked, you're going to whoever it is, and just to get an idea of who they are. When it comes to the business, many times you go in and they want to tell you what they think a person with disabilities could do, and I have to help them rethink that and ask them, well, what would you have someone do if you had an assistant for a few hours a day?
The job that Joan Plotkin does is pretty important. The liquor control generates millions of invoices that need to be quality checked to ensure that the invoice number in particular is correct. The work that she does allows time to be freed up for the IT staff for them to do and pursue other tasks for the department.
I like doing prep work where I prepare the documents to be scanned on the scanner, and I like doing data entry where I check invoices on the computer.
Customized employment is a financially viable alternative for people with disabilities who had historically been thought of as not being able to work.
This job lets me make enough money so I can go on vacation to Ocean City.
Customized employment has to be a good fit for the business. If it does not fit the needs of the business, it's not going to work because it's not charity. You have needs, let's figure out someone that's going to be able to meet those needs. It's also a good fit from the needs of the individual because they've gone through a process of discovery to truly identify not only their skills and capabilities, but how they can best contribute, ideally to a specific business.
Van had been unemployed for several years before getting this customized position.
Should I do it now?
Yeah, that's fine. He has his own money, he has his own job, he's so much more independent than he was before.
He's never missed a day, I can tell you that. Anything that you ask him to do, he'll do it. He's definitely always available and ready to do work.
How's it going?
Hey, good.
It is for you?
It is, thank you.
My job is to put the paper in the machines and do the filing, making copies for Eldora, and organizing the envelopes, and also doing the kitchen work.
It was difficult to have my staff think about some of their day-to-day activities that they do to give it to someone else and to kind of encourage them that it would be an asset to them to allow for a lot of the paperwork to be done by Van. So that was a learning curve.
I do my job, my phone, and then go up to park, take a walk, and then go down to run.
We've tried to customize Andrew's work to help us in the department as well as the hospital. him being able to do the foam run and at times other deliveries of mail frees up my staff to transport patients, which is the highest priority here at Stony Brook.
Andrew is a person that the system was virtually certain could not work. And he's had a very good start on a lifetime of work since '92. And he is a person with a significant impact of disability.
Customized employment wins for the business, but it allows job seekers to really have an opportunity to show their skills. Customized employment is win-win.
Give us an example we can use when we talk about, so if Joe were on SSI, what would happen to his check with those net earnings of $900 a month? I'm going to go back to the website because I just want to be able to show you a few of the other resources on it. So that's under resources. And then on the materials page, there's information also about resources in general, but specifically around the impact of wages on benefits. And so one of the resources I would suggest you could find here or also on the Social Security website is called Working While Disabled, How We Can Help. And there we go. It's a 16-page booklet, and it explains really very clearly what happens to your benefits when you go to work. And so it's really important that you know what benefits a particular student is receiving. As I said earlier, the majority of students would not be receiving a Social Security disability insurance because they haven't worked. They're not drawing off their own work record. If they're drawing off a parental work record, then that's because a parent is either themselves drawing or they've died. But most likely, they're drawing SSI or Supplemental Security Income. And so, again, we can go to page 10 real quickly and just want you to know that all the information really is in here. And basically the main thing that I always want families to know is this, is that it really is important to report wages. And that often is the parent's responsibility, but it's really helpful or important that employment specialists or teachers make sure their parents know that. So real briefly, if Joe were receiving SSI and he were still a student, so I want to talk about it from that perspective. Assuming that Joe were a student and he were earning $900 a month, I want you to see this at the top of the page. Again, this is from Social Security, where it talks about actually that income would be excluded. So up to $7,060 would be excluded so that actually nothing would happen to Joe's SSI check while he's a student. And then once he graduates from school, there would be a gradual reduction. And that is explained in this section. Again, I don't have time to really go through that thoroughly, but it's in this book. And then the other part that sometimes parents worry about is right here, which is, well, what happens if my son or daughter were to work to the point where their SSI check would go away and actually they would still be eligible for Medicaid? So this booklet, again, is on the Support Employment Training Project's website as well as the Social Security Administration's website. And then there are a number of fact sheets right here related to those issues as well. So in particular, I'll just open up the one that I just mentioned. This is really the one that's most relevant to students. So I would hope if you're a rehab counselor or an employment specialist and you do work with students, this would be one you'd probably want to have several. You want to have a bunch of copies of. That one little paragraph in the Social Security Working While Disabled booklet, this is a larger fact sheet on the student earned income exclusion, which again defines who is a student and then talks about the exclusion in terms of the amount of money that would be excluded each month, and then how much would be excluded annually. And that annual amount or monthly amount often increases, and so it also starts all over again in the new calendar year. So want to go back now to share the presentation. So I guess I'm going to go stop sharing.
Yep. And then I can go ahead and do that. If you want to look at their questions.
Well, the benefits, it's after the person's no longer a student. Again, in the length of time that we have here, I can't really explain it in detail, but essentially what happens is that SSI will exclude the first $85, divide the remainder by 2, and subtract that from the benefit. And so, again, there's information both in that booklet as well as from the fact sheets that would talk about that. So yes, the SSI benefit would be lowered, but the important thing that I would hope you would encourage the student and the family to understand is that they will have more money. So yes, the SSI check goes down, but their actual income will go up. And so actually students could work to the point where their SSI check would go to 0, but they would have to be earning about $1,527 a month, which is a whole lot more than the $721 they would be receiving at most. And that's a good point. Yes, Social Security is not real time. It takes a couple of months for those things to catch up. And so that's, it would be really, really helpful if people would keep track of that. That would be a very wise suggestion. So again, I've talked or shown you about these work incentives. There's more information, again, in that booklet. And the ones in particular that probably parents are most concerned about, again, is keeping medical coverage, and they will, and then also that earned income exclusion while they're in school. And then this is a more detailed overhead about that. Again, that information's in the booklet. Impairment-related work expenses are just costs that a student might have that, again, once they're out of high school, could be deducted, and so therefore their SSI check would remain higher. And then this is information about keeping medical coverage, and the name of that work incentive is called 1619B. And so, again, there are a number of resources also on the Human Development Institute's website. The Kentucky Disabilities Resource Manual, that's also on the Support Employment Training Project's website, the Transition One-Stop webpage, Life After High School, the Next Chapter, and then also Megan's story, which is a really excellent, actually Megan tells her story about her post-secondary experience. Megan has subsequently graduated from BCTCS with an associate's degree in early childhood, I think it's the early childhood education, and she actually has a job working in the school system now. And then this webinar series is also on the HDI website. And so this is Katie's, but I have one more I want to show you. So I'm going to, somehow it didn't show up. So I'm going to find one more website because there's one huge directory that I want to make sure you know about. How do I share that? I can't.
You want to share just the website?
I want to share the website.
The link, or do you want to show them something?
I want to show them something on the website. I can't ever find the sharing button. Let's see, you make it smaller.
Sure.
So on the ARC of Kentucky's website, the ARC of Kentucky has actually published a 612-page resource directly for transition. And it's not under their resource button, but you just go up to the search engine, or the search part of their website, and type it in, and you'll see the Kentucky Directory of Transition Services. And actually, you can click the link below to download your copy, and I'm serious when I say it's 612 pages. It's organized by Special Education Cooperative. And so in the beginning of the directory, it gives by county which, like if you don't know which cooperative you're in, it will give a listing of all the cooperatives in their counties. So again, understanding that resources are often part of what people are trying to figure out in order to support meaningful transition. I would say that is the mother of all transition guides. Okay. I wonder if we should let Katie present, if that's okay, and then we'll come back to that. How about we'll do that? Let's let Katie present, and then we'll come back and look at all your questions.
Hello, I'm Katie Wolf-Smith, and I work here also on the Supported Employment Training Project. And so I spend most of my time talking to providers of supported employment across the state of Kentucky. And so as we're talking about transition, a lot of it is, as Carolyn was talking about, knowing what the resources are and sharing that information with each other. I think the most helpful thing is for folks within the school system talking and sharing information with the adult service providers who are a part of this transition phase and going to be there once they do finish school. I think a common barrier is all of a sudden realizing, oh my gosh, school's about to end, what are we going to do next? And if you get to that last semester or that last month or two of school, and then everyone wonders, well, what can she do? Or, well, just who out there would hire him, then we know we're in some trouble. Because there aren't good answers to that question at the last minute, and it does take time to figure those things out and to make sure that everybody is utilizing all the information that's available. I know in an earlier webinar that Kathy Eversole was talking about these previously discussed opportunities, these things that are available within the school system, like the individual learning plan. They record activities that students have while they're in school, their successes during school, and that she talked about that information can be accessed to put into a resume. So there's a record of those things. Those are the kind of things that if they're being filled in, especially for our students with disabilities, that would be great to share with this adult service employment specialist that's coming in and making these connections so that they know what those kinds of things are. The operation preparation that was talked about, where students in the 8th grade and the 10th grade have an opportunity to be matched up with a community volunteer to talk about what are your thoughts as you think about getting out of high school. And as Carolyn said, not that what's going to be the job for the rest of your life, but what kind of things do you think you'd want to do to make and then talk about what kind of things kids should be doing while they're still in school so that those opportunities will be available to them afterwards. And to make sure that students, regardless of the level of impact of disability, have the chance to be a part of those conversations with other people. It helps set the idea in everyone's mind that these kids are going to work or do something after school, just like the kids who aren't in special education. It also allows them to make connections in the community, outside of family, outside of special education, to have those conversations with other people and relationships that perhaps would continue, or to be part of a network when looking for a job down the road. And then the transition planning part of the IEP, there is that emphasis on connecting to other agencies, which isn't the only thing that needs to be done, but is important. You know, if you're in a school where there is a community-based work transition program, then there is someone in the school whose job it is to think about employment and spend that time getting to know the student. And so there's already that connection with Office of Vocational Rehabilitation because students in that program would have a VR counselor, and that's already there. If you don't have the community-based work transition program in your school, Mita Hall, who was on earlier webinars, is still a resource for you, and I'm sure she had mentioned that, so that you can have someone to talk to about, okay, if we don't have this set program through OVR, how can we still help kids and students transition in this way and really be thinking about work and have some of those resources. There's a vocational rehabilitation counselor for every school in the state of Kentucky. Each school has a counselor that they can connect with. And so we need to be making those kinds of connections. So if the school system makes that connection to vocational rehabilitation on a regular basis, that's wonderful. If not, then at least I hope that the schools are letting parents, guardians, and students know about vocational rehabilitation so that they can call and make that appointment. I don't know that it has to be the school's responsibility to do so, but that you all are the point of information to know, let families know what's available so that students do make that connection so they can enter into that system, become a part of that agency so they can start thinking about work and being connected with an employment specialist, an agency that would provide supported employment, or think about going to post-secondary education. Because we know the two most common options for students after they leave high school are college and work. And that's the same whether you have a disability or not. And so there is this decision, and a lot of people work while they are in college, but if the student is interested in going into college, either Voc Rehab or the school or even just that family member can refer to, and by refer to I just mean contact, SHEP, the Supported Higher Education Project, no later than the final semester of school if you're wanting to start college the next year. And I know of quite a few families and school systems that have contacted them a couple of years before they finish high school. SHEP is a program that provides individualized supports for students with intellectual disabilities to go to college. They work with students in different parts of the state. They work with colleges and universities across the state, with state universities, with community colleges. So it's not like you have to be here at UK or you have to be in Murray State. And they spend a lot of time planning with students to figure out what a good course of study would be, if they're going for a regular college degree or an associate's degree, or would want to be a part of a CTP, which is an alternative credential that students can get, but you're still a part of typical classes. You go to class, you meet with professors as others would, but those individualized supports to help someone be successful are figured out so that they can be a part of that college experience. And there's a vocational rehabilitation connection there as well, and that students can be supported in helping to find practicums, volunteer jobs, other learning opportunities while they're in college to explore what work looks like in that field of study. If the student is interested in going to work right out of high school, then at the very latest they need to be connected with an adult service provider. If they're going to be entering supported employment, then be connected with an agency that provides that service, and have an employment specialist is the title of that person who would help with that. And vocational rehabilitation, again, is the way to enter into that service of supported employment to get those supports a student might need to find and then keep a job. But in either direction a student's going to choose, transition planning needs to begin while they're still in school, so that they can be thinking about what option they're interested in, and that people are thinking about that for the student and collecting information to help them plan and help the family make a good decision. If you are going into employment, the vocational rehabilitation counselor can refer you to an agency that provides that service and assign you with an employment specialist. And it's really important then that this person start meeting with the student before they exit high school, that they build that relationship, that they get to know the student, because the student right now is at school where you all know them. You've known the student for many years, so you understand what works and what doesn't, and under what conditions the student is more successful, and under which conditions things don't go so well. And I think really the basis of employment supports is that it begin with the presumption of employment. This idea that everybody, regardless of the impact of disability, has something to offer. They have something to contribute to an employer that is worthy of pay. Sadly, I think one of the most common barriers to employment is that people don't assume that for students with disabilities, that after school they can go to work, or that there is a job that they could do. And I think that's where making sure students are involved in things like operation participation and or preparation, and that the conversation about what life is going to look like after high school, and including the idea of employment, be there all through the school years for students, that they are a part of those conversations about what do you want to be when you grow up, and when you're talking about career planning, that if they're a part of those conversations, then there is this presumption that the student is going to go to work. They aren't going to college after high school. The first step then in supported employment is what we in Kentucky call the person-centered job selection. And it's this idea of what we call discovery, that it's really figuring out who this student is, what they have to offer. So the slide that Carolyn showed about assets and contributions and then the conditions, it's figuring those things out for a student. So there's a few slides here of what we teach in our trainings to employment specialists of how to look at this time of discovery. That it is not just saying, so where do you want to work? In fact, we start with, don't ask that question when you get together with someone. But instead, figure out ways that people can be involved. What are ways that they can contribute? Asking questions and figuring out what works for this person. This idea of testing preconceived notions that might be there, because there's probably somebody who'll say, well, everybody knows Harold can't sit still. Harold can't stay on task. Harold can't focus. Well, what are the times when he can? And if the employment specialist can have these conversations with different people in the school system, then hopefully they can get the answers to some of those questions. Just because you have a wealth of that information. And so it helps when you all can communicate and have that time during the transition planning to have those conversations and get this. Spending time with people where they're familiar, and for students that's going to be at school, and then moving into new things and places that they haven't been and being around people that they aren't used to. This idea of really uncovering gifts and talents and interests, that not just seeing the person for their disability, not just seeing them as special education, but who is this person and what is it that they have to offer. Carolyn talked about the buckets and the idea of these gifts of wisdom, and what just really thinking in those ways about people rather than just what's a job that I think this person could do. What enlivens that spark? And not just asking, because a lot of people might not have the communication to answer, or they haven't thought about it in that way. And if someone has heard over the years, well, I bet you could wipe tables at McDonald's, or I bet you could bag groceries, or I bet you could wash dishes, then if someone does say, so, do you want to go to work and what would you want to do? That's the answer someone's going to give without having had the benefit of thinking about what other opportunities are out there, or without the benefit of really talking with someone who knows what kind of other opportunities are out there, getting to know this person and figuring out how they could access those kinds of job opportunities. And while I just want to explain the last bullet, while I'm all about people having choice and self-determination and a say, that we want to really be careful that we don't abandon people to choice, that it's just because it's the first thing someone says doesn't mean, well, he said he wants to work at Dairy Queen, and so that's what we have to do. But really exploring what work could look like for somebody. I think we talked about all of these points of sharing that information. Like I said, so that we're not just talking about only entry-level service jobs out of high school, which I think a lot of times is what happens, and that we aren't even talking about existing jobs, that customized employment is a real and practical possibility for people. Like Carolyn showed the Pop and Joe video, that, you know, there's a young man that had been making $20 a month in this traditional view of where people with his impact of disability, such as he had, would go after school, versus making $900 a month in this business that really was designed to serve a need within the community, because he was selling a whole lot of popcorn. I mean, you don't sell that much popcorn every month by people just feeling sorry for you. It was a business plan, and a well thought out business plan, but it also very much fit him, knowing that he would need lots of different things to do, that he's not just going to do one thing all of the time. So there are different types of tasks that require different skill sets and different parts of his personality, and that it could, a lot of the timing could be on his schedule, that he did have the supports he needed, so there was somebody there with him while he did inventory. All that was designed around him, but it fit the needs of the community and where people come to sell their wares, that store really benefits because he sells his popcorn there. So that when we think about work, we really are thinking about personalized jobs, that it's not just job placement. It isn't, do you want to work? Yes. Okay, I know that they're hiring, so we're going to put you in there. Or I know these employers who are willing to hire our folks. Which of these are you most interested in? I would say that as on the school side, if you're hearing those kinds of things from the adult service world, then that's the time for you to raise the question, well, what other kind of things would be possible? Because this is what I know about Sarah and what she has to offer. And so really having that rich discussion about what might be best. And so I know often just in my general life when I say what I do, I lots of times get the response, so what can those people do? And there isn't an answer to that question. There isn't a job, there isn't an answer for, so what can kids in special ed do when they graduate? Where can they work? Because it really is dependent upon who that student is and what it is they have to offer. So these are all pictures of jobs for people with disabilities, but it's not because it's a good job for a person with a disability. It's because it's a good job for that individual person. So in the bottom left corner, you see Leanne, who this was her job out of high school. And there was a lot of discussion on what is Leanne, what can she do, what does she have to offer, and there weren't a whole lot of answers for a while until the employment specialist finally found one teacher who said, well, if you want to see Leanne read, or you want to see her light up, give her Sports Illustrated, which the person hadn't naturally thought to do before. And all of a sudden, this whole new world of who Leanne is opened up. And she ended up getting a job for a newspaper stringing high school sports statistics. So it was a job that really fit her, that is so different than typical entry-level service job of wiping tables or cleaning floors, and this is something she was really good at, so that she can contribute. There are other roles around her now that she's in this job where she is successful. And back to this idea of customized employment, that it's really looking at what a job seeker has to offer, what an employer needs done in their business, and then negotiating a job that doesn't already exist that meets the needs of both sides. And so these are all pictures of customized jobs here in the state of Kentucky. And so we have Keith in the upper left corner who tracks subscriptions for a magazine, because it was one of those things when the question was asked after a while of meeting with an employer during job development, so what kind of things don't get done the way you want them done? The employment specialist learned that subscriptions notices weren't going out as they needed to. So once you know what someone has to offer, then you can go out and find that need within a business. And that's the service provider's role, the employment specialist's role. But in the school side, if you can help provide that information of what someone has to offer, how they learn best, how they take instruction, what conditions are important for them to be successful and for these things to all work well, that's the kind of information that the adult service provider needs to know. And here's just a reference of an article that was published in 2012 looking at pre-vocational services, because there are options for students out of school to go to agencies for people with disability where they can work on getting some work skills. There's sheltered workshops that are out there, but study after study has shown that they aren't as effective as at the time of creation we had hoped that they would be. And in fact, this most recent study has again shown that people who have gone into these pre-vocational services, if they do get out of that and go into supported employment, they actually earn less money than people who never went into those pre-vocational services at all. So what studies are finding is that they aren't effective. So that, when someone leaves high school transitioning, really looking at going into college or looking at going straight into work and not entering this kind of other world of disability services in between. A couple important things I think to remember as I've talked with other folks about this idea of transition is that when students have been in school, the student is used to the school, the family is used to the school. If there's been a school job coach, they're really used to that person. This transition time is a time of transition for everybody, so that everybody gets used to this new person, the employment specialist from the adult provider agency, and what thinking about adult life as adult life. That school does end for everybody. And then also just the idea that the goal of supported employment is a job and to be independent on that job. There's an employment specialist that can help someone get a job. They do help them maintain a job with follow-along supports, and that will look different for everybody, the role of the employment specialist, but in no definition does it mean one-on-one support forever. That is not what supported employment is about. And that's why figuring out a good fitting job for a person is so important, so that there doesn't have to be a service provider with them all of the time. These are a lot of just some common concerns that we often hear about, but she's not mature enough for work. Well, and a lot of that goes back to early planning, that expectation of work is set early, that people have the opportunity to figure out what work means, to have those part-time jobs while they're in high school, or volunteer opportunities while they're in school, so that, to have choice at home where they are responsible, to have chores at home, so that people understand what it means to be held responsible for something from an early age. That students with disabilities have those expectations just like other students have those expectations. Transportation is an issue everywhere. In some parts of the state we have easier access to paratransit than others, but on the HDI webpage there's a transportation resource manual that gives transportation options for every county in Kentucky. Another thing is just, how do other people get to work? Yes, there's some places there's public transportation, but a lot of times it's figuring out who at your job works in the nearby where you live that you can arrange a carpool with. I think we need to kind of think about those bigger pictures of things for students we're talking about, as we do all employees, which needs prompting all the time. Again, it goes back to, when doesn't someone need prompting? When do they stay on task? When are they engaged in what's going on and finding work that fits that kind of thing for that individual student. That parents don't want him or her to go to work. Well, often there's the fear about losing benefits that Carolyn talked about, and just making sure that correct information is given. And if we have this conversation about expectations after high school from a young age, then everybody gets used to that expectation and realizing that that's coming. And it's not, it is a shock to enter the adult service world because it's very different than school. But good transition time and planning can help start those conversations early so that it isn't as much of a shock. If you need help or have questions, because oftentimes the adult service world and employment world isn't as easy to navigate as it might be, you have my contact information in the PowerPoint that Patty could share. We have Carolyn's information, and then these are folks within the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation that focus on supported employment. And so you have their names and contact information for the different parts of the state, so that whether an adult service provider or a school person, you can contact them. If you live in Eastern Kentucky, call Gloria Gibson and say, I have questions about how to help my students enter the world of work once they finish school. And she's a good person to help have that conversation with her. You're welcome to talk to me as well. But I wanted to make sure you had that contact information as well. So we thank you for being a part of this today, and for this whole webinar series, those of you that have been able to join the others to get this information, and we'll open up time for questions and look at the questions that you have posted.
I think Karen is talking there, I'm assuming, about if students have some kind of, parents have set up some kind of a savings account, 529 plan. Those plans, typically that money that has to be paid has to be used for room and board and for tuition, although depending on the kind of plan that it is, Karen, sometimes they can buy laptops. So, but there are lots of resources around assistive technology. And again, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation has rehabilitation technology specialists, and who are phenomenal in their knowledge. Maybe Katie could speak about that.
And oftentimes they can be a part of this transition planning. I know rehab technologists in different parts of the states who go into schools and meet with students to help identify what their technology needs are, so that they can be a resource in identifying these, and oftentimes having them be purchased and get them while they're still in school, so they have them once they transition out of school.
So it may be something that, again, the Office for the Blind, if the student is eligible for services there, or the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation could provide for that assistive technology. So I don't know if there were other, we're going to scroll up and see if there are any other questions. Again, Karen had a great idea about figuring out the benefits. There is on the Support Employment Training website, there actually is an Excel spreadsheet that would show what would happen to a person's SSI. But remember, while they're in school, the SSI, the earned income is excluded up to that monthly amount and then up to that annual amount. But then that Excel spreadsheet could show folks what would happen when they're no longer a student. So it would show the reduction in the check, but it also shows really clearly the impact on their bank account, which is in the plus.
So while this employment specialist is meeting with families and students before they exit high school, that's a way that they could go through scenarios. If you make this much money after school, this is what could happen to your check. If you make this much, this is what could happen.
Angela, you were talking about the SSI example. How about I'm going to do my best to see if I can actually show it to you. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go to the website. I'm assuming you're talking about the SSI. So if I go to the Support Employment Training Project's website, there's their home page. You go to Materials, and then I'm going to click down to Impact of Wages on Benefits Calculation Files. We have a SSI worksheet in Excel. So I'll see if it will open. I think that's it. So I'm just going to drop in Joe. If Joe is no longer a student, he's making the $900 a month. It will do all of the math. And it shows you that Joe's SSI check now, instead of being $721, is now $313.50. Of that $900, they're going to count $407.50, but his total cash received is $1,213.50. And so, as Katie was saying, you can actually then do various scenarios, by, again, dropping in that amount of money. But you just have to, you really have to know, again, I would just caution you, you just really have to know what the person's receiving, because if they're getting something in addition to SSI, you have to enter that someplace else on the worksheet. And that's another workshop. That's another webinar. Okay? So thanks for the link. You're welcome. So I think those are probably all the questions.